So hi, my name is Cujo, and I finished Resident Evil 8, and we're going to talk about it. You, as Ethan, find yourself with a family, happy as ever, in love, with a sweet baby, when all of that is suddenly stripped away by none other than your boy Chris Redfield. Shortly after your wife is brutally murdered, and you and your child being taken away, the vehicle mysteriously crashes, and you are plopped down in a winter wonderland. And you find that Ethan's baby Rose is no longer in the van. This leads to a walking section that looks like a Blair Witch Project found footage type of deal. I had to actually quit this section, work up the courage to come back and replay it because the setting I was not mentally ready for. I know, I'm a baby. This is the scene that got me, the opening sequence. One thing this game does effectively, in my opinion, is how much downtime it gives throughout the whole game, at least the first half. It gives you more horrific world building and slower scares over just throwing random jump scares at you. It's 2024. We've been jump scared to hell and back by both shitty indie horror games and motion picture films. I'm craving a nice, well-crafted world. It seems with Resident Evil 7 and 8, they've done a nice job to pull their tram of an IP back onto the right track. Ethan eventually makes his way to a village to nearly be turned into mincemeat, narrowly dodges it, and watches the person who almost did that himself be turned into a delectable treat for something.
What the?
And he's yanked into the floor. And finds that in fact this village did not step out for groceries, but rather in fact ordered takeout, and Ethan finds himself to be a sweet treat for a vampire. Ethan is thrown out, and the game begins to ramp up as you are forced to fight for survival, progressively taking down vampire after vampire, in a scene that is reminiscent of Resident Evil 4's village scene. You become overrun and cannot fight. There's just too many. This huge vampire jumps out of nowhere, like Karl Marx took a bunch of crack cocaine, maybe a little bit of steroids, so he could shoot his shot at wrestling up in the mix. Then he forces you to smell his bad breath. A sound calls them all off, luckily, and we escape intact. Somewhat. Some old lady shows up to tell you shit's fucked. More exploring the village brings you to find some straggler vampires, then survivors who have to say a prayer. Then the dad turns into a vampire and dies and stuff, then doesn't. Then his daughter's like, I'm gonna die with my dad, this shit is too much. Then you say, this is too much.
This is just too much.
Big mommy vampire milkers. You get caught by a guy we later learn is Heisenberg, then are taken to meet all the characters that we are inevitably going to have to fight against. Blatant foreshadowing takes place here and throughout the whole game. Then you're told to skeet away. And boy, do you skeet.
I've been waiting for you, Mr. Winters.
How do you know my name?
Anyone who is anyone has heard of the likes of you. A hero searching for his daughter.
Shut up, you big fat fatty, and let me buy some guns.
Then are caught again. Milkers. This section reminds me of playing through the remake of Resident Evil 2 and how Mr. X roams the hallways. There's something about Dimitrescu's presence that isn't as threatening as Mr. X though. I felt as though most of her presence is scripted while navigating her mansion. Her daughters spook you, but it's used as a way to give you somewhat of a threat as you navigate the mansion to solve the puzzles. I do enjoy the traditional Resident Evil formula, and the mansion is really beautiful. A contrast to 7's swamp house full of intestines and mold and black goo. Nasty. Eventually, you frozone all her daughters and face Dimitrescu yourself, which turns into some shit straight out of Bloodborne. Oh no! Rose is dismembered. No! I can fix her. Bet. As the kids would say. Why did I write this? What the? Beneviento's section does a great job at showing that Resident Evil isn't averse to creating a pure horror segment. Passing through her gate sets the tone for her area immediately. My mother used to torture me with a fear of Chucky also, so I had to fight the masculine urge to cry. You receive visions of Mia and Rose that turns the entire section into a more psychological / metaphorical section. Making your way into the house, your guns are taken away from you, and it turns into a Saw film without the sense that I'm gonna have my head cut off if I don't figure out the solutions to the puzzles in like 3 minutes. And there's a spooky fetus. I've seen people say that this section is the scariest. My hot take is that it is in fact not. The simple reasoning behind that is I got a huge sense of how much of the interacting with the game created events to happen. That for me, creating open-ended free-form events between you and the environment creates a more sense of horror because of how uncontrollable it is. Taking guns away can help with this feeling, but horror in general does its best when it's just you and a monster in a metaphorical playground for you to get spooked in. Honestly, I think people are just afraid of having children in this economy. That's why this part is so scary. I would hide under the bed too. You make it to the elevator and the gates slide shut just in time to reveal Sloth from the Goonies as a baby. Beneviento's fight made me laugh because it was a big game of hide and seek, and her squealing made me laugh. Maybe I'm a Satanist, I don't know. Which leads to this guy that absolutely beat my ass. Now that was scary, dude. Holy shit. This dude is the best. He's literally me, gaming, in a room alone. Literally like taking candy from a baby. You see this big fish thingy, which is the actual threat. Then Moreau confronts you. You say, "You're pathetic."
You're pathetic.
And he goes,
Oh my god, how could you say that word?
then turns into a big eldritch fish. His fight suffers from the same lack of urgency. If you stand around in the fight, he swims around and tries to appear menacing, but he can only get you if you fail to do the scripted, choreographed events successfully, which I failed once. The boss designs are really cool, but this feels like the fish version of Dimitrescu. Shoot little fleshy man tongue thing, do big damage, win. Then we continue onwards. I am the one who knocks. Heisenberg tries to partner up with you, but Ethan turns into an episode of Frenemies. Ethan, more like Ethan Klein. Genuinely, who watches that shit? Being overly antagonistic and overly confident towards the lords of the village for sometimes what feels like no reason.
Fuck you!
I understand that Ethan has lost Rose and is working his hardest to recover her, but wouldn't you actually want to hear characters out and their motivations, instead of saying, "Fuck you!" to everything? You run away from the grown meth head Super Wings and stumble into Heisenberg's factory. This section is probably my favorite for setting and world building. Capcom always does an incredible job at making industrial settings. For some reason, it's nearly every Resident Evil game. Some kind of industrial lab type stuff is going on. And I get it, this is one of their strengths, is creating that industrial horror vibe. This is exactly that. Heisenberg, on the side, has been cooking up cyborg Frankensteins up in here, but mostly focusing on meth. The enemies need to be shot in a power core-like way that I would imagine is how you kill Iron Man if he had a sniper rifle. Scraping nail and gear through Heisenberg's factory, you make it to the inevitable Super Wings face-off. You shoot him in the booty hole, a lot, then try to escape. Heisenberg tells Ethan, no, that we need to cook, then sends him into the abyss. You're then ambushed by Chris Redfield the Chad, who tells you in a very quick statement that he could have told you way earlier in the game that...
What do you care, Chris? You killed my wife, you son of a bitch!
You think I killed Mia? That wasn't her. It was Miranda.
What?
Boom. Plot twist. Ethan was not living with Mia, but Mother Miranda posing as Mia because she is able to shapeshift. Do you think Ethan smashed though? Casually, Chris repairs a fucking mini tank, then tells Ethan to be discreet for whatever reason.
Try to stay under the radar.
You're driving a tank, dude. You immediately go and drive a mini tank into a field. Of course you were going to fight a metallic, malformed Eldritch Heisenberg now. And this is probably my favorite fight out of all the fights when it comes to the gameplay loop and the visuals. You blow Heisenberg and his factory up, then immediately confront Miranda, who rips your heart out. But who cares about all that? You play Chris now! After finding Ethan dead, Chris takes his team of Umbrella Corp members into the village to eliminate Miranda and recover Rose. This game becomes like Resident Evil 6 with the amount of action you end up going through, but I'm all for it. It feels earned and climactic. Plus, with tens of weird werewolf vampire things jumping over the wall, I got a feeling of being in total control from the introduction to Chris's sequence, to then feeling overwhelmed and needing to run in order to manage the amount that jump over that wall. You, Chris, blow up the wall, then head down into Miranda's room, where you discover that Miranda was looking for the perfect specimen to recover her daughter, Ava. The 4 lords of the village were each observed and overall deemed inefficient to be the ones sacrificed to bring Eva back. You find Mia down there. She says she was being experimented on.
I was caught and used in experiments.
This isn't talked about at all afterwards. She reveals that Ethan is in fact impossible to kill. Boom! Cut over to Ethan. He's crawling. He's got no heart. And Evelyn, the girl from Resident Evil 7, pops up and reveals that Ethan died in the Baker home and was reanimated as a mold man. This explains why his limbs recover so quickly. I mean, I guess. I don't really understand the science behind all of it, but it's pretty cool. Ethan then, after making a swift recovery thanks to the Duke, confronts Miranda, which leads to a deific boss fight. Mold man versus weird shapeshifter lady. This is Resident Evil material at its finest. And of course you win, but at a cost. Ethan's mold body begins to fall apart. Chris rescues Rose, and Ethan decides to sacrifice himself to end Resident Evil Village. And you get an epilogue with Ethan's daughter, and it's kind of cool. I did not play the DLC and was not interested in playing Mercenaries for this game. So now that I've explained the story, I'm going to kind of give my thoughts and opinions on Resident Evil Village. I think the best frame of reference to compare Resident Evil 8 with is Resident Evil 4, because it's almost the exact same type of formula, but from different perspectives and different mechanics. Resident Evil 4 is third person. In the expansion for Resident Evil 8, they added third person as well as additional content for Mercenaries, but I just didn't find it worth it. Like, I felt like I've seen enough of the game in Resident Evil 8 to not get the expansion for it. Resident Evil 4 does the same formula, but better, I think, personally. Resident Evil 8 almost feels too formulaic and hand-holdy. What I mean by hand-holdy is it gives you the illusion of, oh, you gotta go fight these 4 lords, and it's more open of a Resident Evil, but you go down the list due to needing keys for specific doors, which I guess that is Resident Evil. But Resident Evil 4, I think, focused on making the combat feel a lot more engaging, so I would prefer to play Resident Evil 4 over Resident Evil 8. Comparing the two games. This game probably did the best out of any Resident Evil in establishing the world and the horror behind it. In terms of walking into the unknown, I was terrified at the opening of this game, but by like this second half of the game, dude, it's like I got no part of me that is scared at all. Like, stuff will even jump at me and I'm like so desensitized. I'm like, blam, shoot him with a grenade launcher. Goodbye. In terms of the story, I always find Resident Evil very ridiculous too. Like, I think the game wanted me to empathize for Ethan a lot, but Ethan was such a dick for like most of it, which I understand. He's trying to get his daughter back, but him as a character, he's so hard-headed that I can't really empathize with him just wanting to be a good dad. I feel sad at the end sequence of this game because obviously like a family is losing the father, the head of the family, but like he didn't seem to really try to understand the world he was in, and he just wanted his daughter. And for me, like, it made it really hard for me to empathize with him. I got a pope. I do think the final fight in Resident Evil 8 has some of the coolest design, and this game just looks really phenomenal and is a good setup for Resident Evil's future. I hope they keep in line with more or less this style and don't fall back into Resident Evil 6. I don't think that the problem is action per se, but that they forget that the core of the game is survival horror. So a bulk of the game should be survival horror. Not that I don't like the Chris Redfield part, where I like get to shoot 50 vampires. That's like really cool. It's just a good climactic point, and not like the whole game, because then it just turns into Call of Duty, and we already got Call of Duty. We already got so many shooters where you just run around mindlessly and shoot everything. Let's plug this game into the scouter and run the numbers. My scouter says this game is 7,943 power level. Not the greatest game ever, but it's pretty damn good. It's pretty up there. I really enjoyed it. I would definitely get this game on a sale. And yeah, that's Resident Evil Village. Let me know in the comments if you have any suggestions for a game for me to review or play through on the channel. Of course, if you like or subscribe, do that kind of stuff. That helps out this channel. Also, if you like this kind of stuff, and feel free to check out another one of my videos. Thank you for taking the time to watch to this point. I love you very much, and goodbye now.